radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 6, recorded on Monday, September 21st, from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we discuss why 2020 sucks. It's the worst year ever, Jason. I hate it.
The end of democracy.
Oh my God. We'll be discussing the life and times of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what's to come next. But first, the headlines.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake, disgusting news.
Up first in headlines, we have some news out of Louisville, Kentucky. There was a settlement in the civil case from the death of Breonna Taylor at the hands of Louisville police. Her family received $12 million, $5 million coming from the city's risk management fund. The other $7 million will come via the city's self-insurance fund. So as always, it's not the police department's paying for this out of their budget.
It's the taxpayers.
It's the taxpayers.
And on top of that, the settlement also included 12 demands for police reforms. A couple of examples here. Early action warning systems to identify officers with red flags, mandatory commanding officer reviews of all search warrants, mandatory body camera counting for 2 officers of all currency seizures, mandatory written approval of all SWAT matrices before search warrants are executed, and several more. This is good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the real gain out of all of this. Obviously, the money is important for her family.
Right.
And it's important to carry on the legacy of Breonna Taylor, set up a foundation, things like that.
But this is actually how you make systemic change happen.
Yeah, this
is
how
what we want.
Yeah, this is how you improve the life of every citizen of Louisville so that something like this doesn't happen again.
Totally agree.
And we definitely will be taking a closer look at this case in the future.
Yeah, I think this will be a good future topic for us. There's a lot of stuff to cover just with this one tragic incident, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of misinformation, a lot of things to kind of clear up as we move into, hopefully, a criminal case against at least a few of these police officers involved.
Right, and the criminal case is still pending, correct?
Yeah, this is just the civil case.
Right. And in other news, we have an actual fascist in the White House. Jason, how do you feel about that?
I am obligated to say that it is great. It is the best, the bestest, greatest thing ever.
You are assimilating well, comrade. In all seriousness, on September 17th, Trump announced that he plans to sign an executive order soon to create a national commission to support patriotic education called the 1776 Commission, and that he is directing funding to create a patriotic curriculum in public schools. What the fuck is this?
Yeah, this is definitely him taking a shot at the 1619 Project.
Without a doubt. He attacked the 1619 Project by name in his speech. I don't understand how anyone can be okay with this. This is literal dystopian stuff that you only see in like 1984-esque books and fiction like this.
Quote from Trump, "Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their heart and all of their soul."
We literally have the Hitler Youth coming in the modern age. What is that?
This should scare everyone.
I'm so upset.
If
what
you
is
didn't
happening?
need another reason to vote for Joe Biden in this election, this should be enough.
So if your crazy aunt or crazy uncle starts coming to you about how evil and how overreaching the Democrats are, you have to tell them this and tell them that you have a literal fascist right now in the White House that's going to give a propagandized education to our youth.
He said teaching the history of slavery and racism in our country was toxic propaganda and a form of child abuse in the truest sense of those words.
And how is that even a thing? How is, I don't even know how that makes sense.
No, it's just telling the truth.
It's just history.
The founding fathers were slave owners.
Right.
They would write about all men being created equal and then go home and own people.
And then beat their slaves. And in some instances, raped their slaves.
Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
Well, probably all of them. I mean, honestly, we only know about Jefferson because she had his kids. And it was not consensual. She was property.
And like we said before, he also took aim at the 1619 Project directly, which is a New York Times-backed initiative that focused on the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the story we tell ourselves about who we are as a country. That's a quote from the New York Times. The project, which won a Pulitzer Prize for its commentary, was also released last year with the anniversary of slaves being brought to the Virginia colony 400 years ago.
Yes, our country, whatever you might think of it, was built on the backs of slaves. That is a fact.
And for the record, I highly recommend checking out the 1619 Project if you haven't already. It's fantastic. It's a great way to actually learn about how we were kind of taught history incorrectly the first time. And how we did not give any attention to the black massacres that happened throughout all our entire history.
Yeah, we found out about the Tulsa race riots from an HBO TV show about superheroes.
Right. And to make matters even worse, Trump also threatened to cut off funding for schools that teach the 1619 Project, which he doesn't even have the power to do.
Yes, the president once again does something or threatens to do something that is illegal and unconstitutional.
So we have an idiot fascist in the White House right now.
And that's all of these aides and everybody who's worked in the White House. They constantly say this. He doesn't know what the laws are. He doesn't know where his power ends. And he constantly threatens people because he wants to do things that he can't do. And when they tell him you're not allowed to do that, he wants to get rid of them.
Right.
He is unhinged.
But it's also just the idea of complete denial of the facts here when it comes to like racism in America. I mean, I even remember back when in parts of Bob Woodward's interviews where Woodward asked him about, do you realize the pain that's being experienced right now by black Americans? And Trump asked Woodward, told Woodward, wow, you must be really drinking the Kool-Aid. He thinks this whole thing's BS.
Yeah, what a surprise. The person that was born a millionaire doesn't understand the plight of the underclass.
The guy who's literally on quote saying, where's my African American over there?
And whose family has been sued for
literally discriminating.
Yeah, for racist practices in their real estate business.
We just go from like one bad news story to the next. This is such a depressing episode.
And it won't ever end.
Ugh.
Moving from the president that should be impeached to the attorney general that should be impeached, William Barr criticized his own Justice Department prosecutors as a permanent bureaucracy that all too often abuse their power to go after high-profile targets in a process he likened to headhunting.
And for the record, the victims of this supposed headhunting that he's talking about, like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn.
Yeah, all Trump affiliates.
Right.
Because he believes the Justice Department is solely a tool of the state and should never be used to investigate its administrators or their cronies. It should only be used by the state against their enemies. And he literally said that. Under the law, all prosecutorial power is vested in the Attorney General, and these people are the agents of the Attorney General. As I say to FBI agents, whose agent do you think you are? Now, I don't say this in a pompous way, but that is the chain of authority and legitimacy in the Department of Justice.
Which is not how it works.
He's saying, I am the supreme power
right.
for the Justice Department,
he is
and
the final
I direct.
Head. Yeah, he is the final head of all decision making.
Yeah, and even the fact that he even pointed out, I tell this to FBI agents, whose agent do you think you are? There are agents, Joe.
Right.
They're not William Barr's agents. All of these things add up to show everyone, how can you possibly not vote for Biden at this point? We need to get these people out. We need to show them who has the real power in this democracy before we lose the opportunity to ever have it again.
And just to make sure that we know how crazy Bill Barr even is, he goes off to cite C.S. Lewis and religion. He talks about COVID-19 lockdowns, quote, other than slavery, which was a different kind of restraint, this is the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in American history. Then he later addressed the Black Lives Matter movement, saying, they're not interested in black lives, they're interested in props, a small number of blacks who are killed by police during conflicts with police, usually less than a dozen a year, who they can use as props to achieve a much broader political agenda. Go fuck yourself, Bill Barr. I am so done with him.
Clearly, he's saying, oh, these people are just props that are being used. They don't matter.
No, that's exactly what he's saying. He doesn't give a rip about them. He doesn't care about people dying. It's the fact that he just sees that everyone's just a prop because it's a thing that he doesn't like. But this goes back to the same nonsense argument that he doesn't think racism even exists in America right now.
having to social distance and wear a mask and not go out to eat at restaurants every night is slavery.
Right, and then literally comparing that to slavery itself.
That was just a different kind of restraint.
And in more of the world is ending news, Scientific American, the science-based magazine, has done something they haven't done in their 175-year history. They endorsed a presidential candidate.
Which one? Was it Trump?
The one who is pushing hydroxychloroquine. No! They endorsed Joe Biden.
According to the editors at Scientific American, they have never endorsed a presidential candidate in their 175-year history, but this year they were compelled to do so. They do not do this lightly. They say the evidence and the science show that Donald Trump has badly damaged the U.S. and its people because he rejects evidence and science. The most devastating example is his dishonest and inept response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which cost more than 190,000 Americans their lives by the middle of September. He's also attacked environmental protections, medical care, and the researchers and public science agencies that help this country prepare for its greatest challenges. That is why we urge you to vote for Joe Biden, who is offering fact-based plans to protect our health, our economy, and the environment.
Y'all, we got Scientific American getting involved with politics. That's how bad it is. I do have to say, though, like, that actually does say a lot, right? One of the oldest scientific magazines in our country's history speaking out, saying they feel compelled to do something about this finally.
And they are right.
Right. I mean, that statement's amazing.
The president is anti-science, anti-scientist, anti-reality. Anything that doesn't agree with him and his agenda is wrong. It's fake.
And this is just another example of the long line of people and organizations who are finally starting to realize how bad and dangerous Donald Trump and his administration is, and they finally feel like they have to speak out. Jason, I need a happy story. Do you got one for me?
I don't know how happy it is. It's not quite as end times as the rest of them.
I'll take it. What is it?
Well, in local Wisconsin news, on Tuesday, James Senda was walking along Lake Michigan in Racine looking for sea glass when he came across a brick-shaped package wrapped in aluminum foil with a pink rubber band. Now, as any normal person would, he thought, hey, drugs or money. Either is great, right? Instead, what he found inside was a brain.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
That's not usually what you find along the beach.
Oh, my God, that picture.
Per Mr. Senda, when I first opened it, I think I was so shocked it didn't click what it was. I walked up to city workers nearby, and I was like, did I just find a brain? How'd you like to be those city workers? Some guy walks up with a brain in their hands. Hey, man, I just found this in the lake. What is it? You're like, man, you know how much paperwork I have to fill out now?
Oh, God, it looks like a... Ugh.
Yeah, the pictures are pretty gruesome. Police said on Thursday that the brain did not belong to a human. Medical examiners did verify that. They don't know. It looks like a small mammal, maybe a cat. There were also some flowers and what looked like money in the aluminum foil package. My guess, when looking at it, is it reminds me of the joss paper, the Chinese ghost money that people burn at funerals. And I'm thinking that that's probably what it is. It looks like the ink kind of running there, which you wouldn't normally have with actual currency.
So what would this be like? Some kind of like ceremonial brain out to sea thing? Or
I looked to try to see if I could see some tradition or anything that lined up with this, just with a Google search, best I can do. I did not find anything. I definitely found, the money and flowers, white flowers. It looks like the flowers are either white or pink in the picture. Nowhere did I come across anything where you wrap a brain in a package and burn it or offer it. That I have no idea. Definitely a weird find, though.
Oh my
Not
God.
a story you hear about every day. I did like in some of the stories, some of these news organizations just say along the shore or on the beach.
Yeah.
Like we're on the ocean here in Wisconsin. So I had to, I assumed it was Lake Michigan, but I had to look it up to verify.
I like how you said, I'm glad I'm the one who found it.
Yeah, just saying that, what if some kid found... The
Right.
kid probably wouldn't care. You're kind of traumatized because you're a grown adult and
Right.
you can't fathom a brain in a package. A kid would be like, whatever.
The guy's just standing with a brain in his hand. Sir, what do you want me to do with this? Seriously, I don't want to hold this anymore.
Hey, you think he like just handed it to the city workers? Here, what is that?
Could
a brain?
you imagine how crazy
then,
he would have looked? Just like, hey, I know what you're thinking. I'm not crazy, but here's a brain.
It's yours now.
Left wing. We're going left wing all the way.
All right, Jason, let's talk about the most depressing thing tonight. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away.
Yes, Friday night from
a long time battle.
With cancer.
Yep.
She's had multiple forms of cancer over the years.
How did you first hear about it? And what was your reaction?
I think actually your text.
Oh.
I got your message saying that she had died. I don't normally watch, I don't have cable, so I don't watch regular. I only watch streaming stuff. So I wasn't watching the TV. I'm not a huge social media guy, so I'm not usually online all the time. Trying hard not to be upset that someone wanted to keep doing what I would imagine they love doing and get into, the complaints that everyone has right now, that she was in her 80s when Obama was still president. She could have stepped down, enjoyed a few years of retirement, and made sure she was replaced by a judge that would continue her legacy. I believe that she really wanted to serve under a female president, and she was assuming that Hillary would win the presidency, and then she would retire and let the first female president ever pick her replacement. Now, there's the opportunity for her to very much go out the way that Thurgood Marshall did, being replaced by Clarence Thomas, that we might very well replace the female Thurgood Marshall with the female Clarence Thomas, which would just be terrible for her legacy and for the country.
Right. And I think what really upsets me about this too is my first thought when I first saw the news was, oh my God, not at this time, which really upset me, where I think we're in such a tense situation right now with America that people can't even properly mourn RBG and really celebrate her life the way that she should be, or that we all should be celebrating. But now people are just so freaked out about what's going to happen next. Because again, like we talked about before, we have a literal fascist in the White House. And I think that just kind of puts a whole stain on the entire situation that makes me feel gross.
Well, we'll certainly get back to the crusade to replace her. But why don't we start by talking a little bit about her life?
Yeah, let's do that. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg graduated from Cornell University in 1954. In 1956, Ginsburg enrolled at Harvard Law School, transferred to Columbia Law School after her husband took a job in New York City, graduating from Columbia with a law degree in 1959.
So there is a story that while she was at Harvard, she was one of 9 female students in the entire Harvard Law year, and all of the female students were invited to dinner at the dean's family home when he asked them all, why are you at Harvard Law School taking the place of a man? That should kind of explain the atmosphere that she was in as a woman in law school in the 50s.
Right.
She was not accepted at all.
Right. I mean, when you have a pretty misogynistic society in general, but then you have a male-dominated field like law that was known for being ruthless against either people of color or women. So in 1960, she was rejected from a clerk position with Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter for being a woman, adding more to that great total. After clerking for U.S. District Judge Edmund Palmieri, Ginsburg taught at Rutgers University Law School from 1963 to 1972.
In 1972, she became a professor at Columbia Law, becoming the first female full professor at Columbia. A quote from her at the time, "Sexual discrimination is and will continue to be my principal interest. It is an area new to the law school, an area that has been neglected far too long." And that was in reference to her actually adding sexual discrimination to the curriculum that she was teaching at Columbia. And during the 1970s, she also served as the director of the Women's Right Project of the American Civil Liberties Union, for which she argued 6 landmark cases on gender equality before the U.S. Supreme Court, winning 5 of them. One of those 5 cases she won involved a portion of the Social Security Act that favored women over men because it granted certain benefits to widows, but not to widowers. And that's also another thing she was known for. Fighting gender discrimination, but then taking cases that show that it also affects men, not just women,
Right.
to make it a little bit more relatable to the exclusively male judges that she was arguing in front of.
Then in 1980, President Carter appointed Ginsburg to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. She was the second woman to be elected to the Supreme Court after Sandra Day O'Connor, nominated by Bill Clinton in 1993, confirmed by a Senate vote of 96-3, overwhelming.
And really the only...
Which is kind of crazy to think about, too.
Yeah, the only criticisms that I could find from the time were actually people concerned that she was too conservative. Something that she'd actually been known for, being a federal judge, that she didn't like to make sweeping changes. She preferred incremental steps and was actually considered to be not as progressive as a judge as she was as a lawyer. Her rise to political icon status began in 2013 in the Shelby County versus Holder case, which gutted the Voting Rights Act. Thank you, Republicans. She wrote, "I dissent" in her rebuttal instead of "I respectfully dissent," which was like, in the legal world,
a big deal.
That's a mic drop.
Right.
So that was like what really got people's attention. New York University law student Shanna Nishik, I'll go with Nishik, launched a blog, the notorious RBG Tumblr blog. That meme took off everywhere on the internet, led to a 2015 book, CNN documentary of the same name. We just had the movie that came out on the basis of sex. She became a rock star, cultural icon. She was everywhere there was.
For all things civil rights.
Yeah, really for all things anti-Trump eventually.
I mean, right.
When she said that he was a faker and had no consistency in him in 2016. But she had her fitness book. There were action figures you could buy. I think she's got 5 biographies. And no doubt, I mean, as a civil rights lawyer and particular gender equality, there's no one in our country that equals the status that she got. Certainly there's a long, long line of people that assisted her, people that also did just as much, but she got, being a Supreme Court justice and even arguing 6 cases before the Supreme Court, I mean, that makes you, in the legal realm, a rock star. And it also translated to the pop culture world, which is rare for a Supreme Court justice. And then certainly a lot of the fascination, once Trump unfortunately won the presidency, really turned to she needs to hang on for 4 years at least.
And that's kind of what she tried to do, you know?
Yeah, she had one job, Joe.
So that brings us to right now and what's going to happen next. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be good.
So to set this up, in February of 2016, before Trump or Clinton were even nominees for their party, Justice Antonin Scalia died, meaning that Barack Obama, the president, for the entire rest of that year, was going to pick his successor.
As presidents should.
As is the constitutional duty of the president of the United States. He nominated Merrick Garland. Again, the only real complaint there, not very liberal, kind of a more centrist. People weren't exactly excited about it, but whatever, middle of the road. Will not be too controversial in an election year.
I mean, as much as I hate to say it, it's kind of like what you expected Supreme Court justices to be, right?
It's what a reasonable person in a reasonable situation might expect.
Right, like there was nothing crazy about him at all, and this should have gone off without a hitch.
Should have. Instead, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refused to have the Senate vote on his nomination, and instead said that the American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. Therefore, this vacancy should not be filled until we have a new president. Now, keep in mind, this is in February, 9 months before the election.
And many Republicans cited the quote-unquote Biden rule that happened, or that got a lot of fame very quickly within Republican circles. Basically, the Biden rule kind of consists of a 1992 speech that Republicans often cited where Joe Biden was urging President Bush at the time to not nominate a Supreme Court justice during an election year.
Yeah, so again, not a rule so much as what he wanted. And they took that to mean a hard, fast rule. President cannot nominate a justice during an election year.
Right.
Just to clarify, this is in 1992. President Herbert Walker Bush is just at the end of his first term. He can still run for another term, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's going to come up later.
And then on top of that, multiple Senate Republicans actually drafted and signed a letter to Mitch McConnell expressing their intention of not confirming any justices that President Obama would put forward. Quote, "As we mourn the tragic loss of Justice Antonin Scalia and celebrate his life's work," whatever, "the American people are presented with an exceedingly rare opportunity to decide in a very real and concrete way the direction of the court will take over the next generation. We wish to inform you of our intention to exercise our constitutional authority to withhold consent on any nominee to the Supreme Court submitted by this president to fill Justice Scalia's vacancy."
Some notable senators signed that letter. Ted Cruz, the Zodiac Killer. Lindsey Graham, Trump's personal foot washer. Chuck Grassley, who was the Judiciary Chair at the time. And Jeff Flake, aptly named, who has since,
He's not in the Senate anymore.
Yeah, he's retired basically because he got on the wrong side of Trump and wasn't going to deal with the consequences of that, and instead didn't run for re-election.
So you have a bunch of Republican politicians saying that we should be holding off until after the election in 2016 because we want to let the people have a voice. Fast forward to today, their words mean garbage.
We're currently less than 45 days away from the election. Not 9 months. Less than 2 months.
And you see Republicans completely flipping to justify pushing or ramming a Supreme Court justice down our throats right before the election is supposed to happen.
Because it's not about the will of the American people. It's about the will of the conservatives. That's all they care about.
So let's look at what Lindsey Graham said, for example. Back in 2016, he said, and I quote, "I want you to use my words against me. If there is a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination." He later repeated that sentiment back in 2018 with Jeff Goldberg, saying, "If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait till the next election." So you have to assume good-hearted Christian Lindsey Graham is going to stay honest and consistent, right? Where the hell have you been?
Yeah, Lindsey Graham is just a tool of the conservatives and of the president. And just a tool.
He, like many others right now, are just kind of talking about how, well, this is different. This is just a different situation.
And I've heard this from Turtle Boy saying that, well, it's different from Obama. Obama couldn't possibly be president for a third term, so we knew we were getting a new president. That's why we had to wait. But now we're in a situation where, hey, Trump could win. So let's let him get the Supreme Court nomination in. We'll vote on it, and he'll probably win anyway, so it'll be fine. That's why it's different. He has the possibility of being president. And you know what? If Biden wins, oops, our bad.
Well, and let's get through this nonsense arguments about how the Merrick Garland situation was different compared to now, right? So technically, yes, the political makeup of the government was different as it is today. I understand that. There was a lame duck presidency with President Obama back in 2016 where he had Republican-held majority in the Senate. However, the whole point of this was to make precedent and change the game of politics. And that's what Republicans did. This wasn't done before. The idea of holding up a Supreme Court justice for 9 months has never been done before. And even if the situation today is different based on the fact that it's not a lame duck president, you still lose the moral argument and the ethical argument because you changed the game.
And they would still have a conservative majority in the Supreme Court. You're just replacing one quote-unquote liberal justice with another. They would still have that 5-4 advantage, but that's not even good enough. They want proof against somebody like we've seen recently with Gorsuch kind of going against what everyone thought he would do. And they have had conservatives have had issues with their hand-picked conservative justices siding with the liberal side of the court on big rulings. And they want that 6-3 majority so that even if somebody does flop over, they're still protected. They would have 9 conservative justices if they could, which is why Trump cannot have another term. One, it would guarantee that any kind of fight to try to hold up this nomination would be in vain. And two, we said it in the Why Progressives Should Vote for Joe Biden episode, there are 3 more potential replacements in this next term.
Right. Well, and on top of that, let's look at how replacing or having Trump replace the Ginsburg seat with someone who's more right-wing and see what that does to the court. So if you have a right-winger replacing Ginsburg, like Jason just said, that gives them a 6-3 advantage in the court. Our swing vote before Ginsburg passed away was Justice John Roberts, who is a pretty staunch conservative. Our only luck with him is that he is probably one of the last institutionalists on the court right now, as opposed to like maybe the other like Kagan and Breyer, where they actually care about the integrity of the court. Thomas doesn't care. Alito is a crazy person. But even then, you still had to figure out a way where John Roberts wanted to do and push as much conservative stuff as possible while making the court not look as bad as it was. If you replace Ginsburg with a hard right-wing radical, our new swing vote will be basically either Kavanaugh or Gorsuch.
You're going to need them and Roberts.
Right. We have to appeal to either Kavanaugh's hopeful institutionalism, which is barely there, or Gorsuch's textualism. And hopefully you can argue some crazy way that this is what our founding fathers would have wanted, similar to like what he did with the recent LGBT rights case.
And that's not what conservatives want. They're going to push. I mean, you look at some of the, and we will look at some of the potential nominees. Wow, they're really hitting the bottom of the crazy barrel on who they want to come in there because they want somebody who is just going to give them and let's be honest, they want to take away abortion.
Yep. The biggest thing is they want Roe v. Wade overturned.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing by far.
And that's what they'll get if they get this nomination through. And what does this do with the very realistic possibility of an extremely contested 2020 election? If you have a 6-3 conservative majority Supreme Court, 3 of which are recent Trump appointees, you think they're going to vote? You know how Trump is and what kind of loyalty he demands of people and what he pushes them to do, mostly illegally. Half of his associates are in jail or were pardoned by him. What do you think he's going to press the Supreme Court to do in his favor? The Supreme Court decided the 2000 election.
Now, Trump did say recently that he was going to nominate a woman. So we're going to look at 3 female candidates that Trump will probably be looking at the most to replace Ginsburg's seat. As many of you probably have heard already, the leading candidate right now, or at least the most known, would be Amy Coney Barrett. She is 48 years old. She's a former clerk of Justice Antonin Scalia, a member of the Federalist Society. So pretty much already it tells you everything you need to know about her.
She is also a religious conservative.
Of course. Why not?
So forget any kind of religious freedom if you're not a Christian in this country.
And she was a pretty controversial pick when she was initially nominated to the federal bench as well because of her religious extremism.
She's a member of a cult.
Hooray!
She's allegedly a member of it, because when you're a cult, you don't really confirm if people are members or not, of the People of Praise, a Christian charismatic movement that has been called a cult by other people and by me, and was possibly the inspiration for Margaret Atwood's novel, The Handmaid's Tale. Doesn't that sound fun? They call the female attendants handmaids.
Or at least they used to.
They used to until that book became popular.
Right, now they're women leaders.
And Margaret Atwood has said some things like she based the book off of a Catholic charismatic movement. Now, technically, People of Praise is not Catholic. They're non-denominational, but they're overwhelmingly majority Catholic.
I think it was like 80 or 90% Catholic or something like that.
And she even said they call, these people handmaids. She definitely was talking about this group.
Oh, right. Also, another former professor of law at Notre Dame University, which is where Barrett worked, claimed that Barrett once said that her legal career was, quote, but a means to an end, and that end is building the kingdom of God.
Yeah, that's what you want to hear.
Oh my God.
And someone who's 48 and will have a lifetime appointment to the highest court.
On top of that, Barrett also spoke in 2013 during the 40th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision, which legally protects the right of women to seek an abortion of, quote, her own conviction that life begins at conception, per Notre Dame magazine.
So, again, if she is a Supreme Court justice with a 6-3 majority, forget about abortion rights, any kind of birth control, probably going to be illegal.
Yep. On top of that, let's talk about like discrimination, where you're probably going to completely throw away LGBT rights and civil rights in other areas because of religious liberty.
Can't impose your freedoms on other people's right to judge you because of their religion. So the fact that you're gay and want to get married offends the religious sensibilities of Barrett and people like her, and she needs to protect those sensibilities. It's more important than you being able to live your life.
Then in a 2017 Law Review article, Barrett publicly criticized the 2012 SCOTUS decision that upheld the Congress's authority to enforce crucial provisions of the Affordable Care Act, writing that, quote, Chief Justice John Roberts pushed the Affordable Care Act beyond its plausible meaning to save the statute.
And in case you're thinking that, well, they've already attacked the Affordable Care Act as much as they possibly can and basically destroyed it, what more can they do? Well, the Supreme Court is set to hear arguments again on a case regarding the validity of the ACA in November, just after the election.
So we need to understand that what Republicans will do is they'll keep coming back, pushing for these issues over and over again, like Roe v. Wade, like with the ACA. And all they're doing is just biding their time until they have a supermajority on the Supreme Court where they can get everything they want. That's why this is such a big deal.
Trump was quoted when he nominated Kavanaugh. Most people thought it was going to be Barrett then. He's been quoted by people that were in private meetings with him saying that he was saving Barrett specifically to replace Ginsburg, as in just an extra kick in the ribs to her legacy, to replace her with her ideological opposite, because Donald Trump is a dick. What about some of the other possibilities? Let's look at Barbara Lagoa. She is 52 years old. She is a Cuban American from Florida. She was confirmed as a federal judge with an 85-15 vote in the Senate. So she's already been vetted in the Senate. Probably be an easier vote than Barrett.
And she's probably considered, we'll say, more moderate of some of the other nominees.
Which means she's also not as popular with conservatives.
This would be like Trump's safe pick, where if someone like Amy Coney Barrett will be seen as too extreme, or even later we'll talk about Allison Jones Rushing as also too crazy and extreme, this will be a much easier person to get through the nomination process.
I think the biggest problem that she's going to have with conservatives is because the Roe v. Wade, the abortion rights, is their big issue. During her confirmation hearing for the 11th Circuit Court, she told the Senate that she believes that Roe v. Wade is binding precedent of the Supreme Court and settled law. You know, they don't like to hear that.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting because before I heard that, I thought Lagoa was actually going to be the nominee, because I think, well, we can talk about this later too, but I think Trump can't really put up too much of a crazy fight right now. So the idea of having Lagoa, who is a much more moderate, and when I say much, I mean by like a tick down the scale of conservative. She's still pretty right wing, which is what we'll get to in a bit. But the idea of a much more professional who already got accepted overwhelmingly in the Senate, and then have Democrats try to fight against, I think would be a better political move for him. But the fact that she's already said that Roe v. Wade is standing precedent just kind of screws up the whole plan.
And if you're wondering what Trump thinks about her, being the legal scholar that he is, what are his nuanced views? On Saturday, he said,
These are so bad.
She's an extraordinary person. I've heard at length about her. She's Hispanic and highly respected. Miami. Highly respected. When asked again on Monday, she's excellent. She's Hispanic. She's a terrific woman from everything I know. As he was talking to Fox News. I don't know her. Florida. We love Florida. So we know the two things that Trump knows about her.
No,
She's from Florida,
and she's
Hispanic.
No, three. She's also excellent.
Well, I guess.
That is the
best.
trifecta.
But he only cares about those two things because one, he hopes it'll help him with the Hispanic vote, and two, he hopes it'll help him win Florida.
Well, this is the kind of nuance that came from Trump, back in during the 2016 election, where he had a taco salad. Remember that? And he's like having like a taco salad at one of my Trump hotels.
Yeah.
I love Mexicans.
Traditional Mexican taco salad.
Oh my God. Now let's go through some of Lagoa's record just to show how right-wing she still is, even though she is the more moderate of the bunch. So she was recently appointed to the Florida State Supreme Court, where she ruled with the majority in Florida, barring ex-felons the right to vote unless all outstanding debts were paid, which is basically implementing a poll tax on ex-felons and taking away people's rights. So that's great.
And it really shows what our justice system is about. That whole, you get out of prison and you have all this debt that you have to pay. You don't have a job. You've just been getting paid 9 cents an hour for the past however long you were incarcerated. You've got thousands upon thousands of dollars in debt. No one's going to hire you because you have this conviction on your record.
And by the way, you can't vote.
Yeah, and all these other things, you have to pay that money back. And you know what happens if you don't pay, Joe? That's a violation of your parole. You go back
to
in jail. That's terrible. That's a whole other, that'll be a topic for another day.
It's almost like it's systemic or something.
It's almost like the system is designed to keep you incarcerated.
Then taking on a minimum wage case in Florida, Lagoa sided with business groups challenging a decision by the city of Miami Beach to raise its minimum wage. Miami Beach had tried to require private sector employees to gradually raise pay for minimum wage employees to $13.31 an hour, where their current minimum wage was $8.56 an hour. So again, no states' rights, or no city rights.
She really fights for the little people.
Right. So long story short, Lagoa would be the safe pick for Trump here. This would be the one that he would choose to make the fight a little bit easier and try to push her through faster. And last, and certainly least, Allison Jones Rushing. She is 38 years old, part of the, that's so young. She is currently on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And another example of an underqualified candidate who was pushed to the federal bench by Trump and McConnell. She had a pretty highly contentious nomination where she only practiced for 9 years in the law, which the American Bar Association recommends a minimum of 12. She only tried 4 cases, before being nominated to the federal bench back in 2018.
She interned with the Alliance Defending Freedom, which, if you couldn't tell from their name, is a right-wing anti-LGBT hate group.
And they are specifically designated as an SBLC hate group.
Yeah, any of those, Family Foundation, Freedom, anything with that in the name, run away.
Right. And we're talking about the legal group who constantly tries to fight against anything that has to deal with LGBT rights, that constantly tried to criminalize homosexuality or sodomy laws, and that has done things. I think they defended the Masterwork Cake Shop guy for discriminating against trans people. It's a horrible thing, and no sane person would ever go near this group.
She penned a 2005 article, Nothing to Stand On, Offended Observers, and the 10 Commandments. A quote from that article, "Every village secularist to charge into court with the ACLU and challenge governmental acknowledgments of religion, no matter how passive or benign. These delicate plaintiffs with eggshell sensitivities, who claim deep offense at the acknowledgement of any beliefs that conflict with their own, then seek court orders censoring the religious message as a type of heckler's veto." So she's a religious fundamentalist.
Who also doesn't understand establishment law. How is she on the federal bench?
Because Trump panders to his religious base. They're one of the few groups he has left. And he knows that if he has any shot of a second term, he has to hold on to them as tightly as possible. They're some of the least likely to go over to Biden, and he knows that. So he panders to them to try to keep their support.
And this is another thing you can bring up to your crazy Republican aunts and uncles, is the people that Trump honestly nominates throughout the federal bench will be his everlasting legacy, where you have hundreds of people who are considered not qualified to serve on the federal bench, who will be lasting lifetime appointments on these chairs.
I hear Tiffany Trump has a law degree.
Great. So those are our three main candidates for the nomination right now. So luckily, I mean, in the most loose sense, at least we're not going to see a Tom Cotton or a Ted Cruz as a potential Supreme Court nominee. Thank goodness. But these three are still really freaking bad. And this is why this is such a big deal.
Hey, you know who I heard was on his list of 20 that he gave earlier?
Who?
Charlie Sykes' ex-wife, Diane Sykes.
Oh my God, shut up. Is she really?
Yes.
No.
For those who don't know, Charlie Sykes was a horrendous conservative radio talk show host here. I think he filled in for Rush Limbaugh a couple times. He was in the Milwaukee market forever and just destroyed Wisconsin politics. And then he was a never Trumper, though. When Trump was elected, he moved. I think he stopped doing his radio show. I think he does appearances on MSNBC now.
I haven't heard from him in a long time.
Yeah, he's
Thank goodness.
definitely, I mean, not totally flipped on his views, but he hates Trump. And yeah, his ex-wife, it was on that list of 20 potential candidates. She's not been mentioned when they talk about who's likely to become the nominee, but certainly interesting from a local perspective. Most people here are familiar with Charlie Sykes, so kind of interesting that his ex-wife is at such a high-profile position.
Right.
She's also a member of the Federalist Society.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, I think that's something we should be bringing up as well. If you haven't already known, when it comes to Trump's federal justice picks, whether it's for the Supreme Court or federal appeals courts or whatever, this is basically handpicked all by the Federalist Society, which is a right-wing legal group that is designed to push hardcore right-wing beliefs. Nothing moderate, nothing in mainstream law or politics. I guess you could say it's mainstream now because everyone's crazy on the bench, but keep in mind that we have a radical right-wing group handpicking nominees and just giving them to our president. And that's how we're deciding who should be on our bench right now. That's our vetting process, whether they are qualified or not. And here's the best part of the whole thing. I don't know what we can do. Short answer, Jason, there's not much we can actually do here. Elections have consequences, and unless we can get the votes to stop the nomination, he's going to push it.
Yeah, there is certainly some talk about, are they going to want to have the vote before or after the election? If they wait until after, there's the possibility that if they lose big, there's not going to be the political will to try to push forward. But if they do it before, then they lose any sort of incentive for people to vote in order to get their Supreme Court nomination. So that's a calculation they're going to have to try to do. Do they wait and try to push that as an election issue? Like, oh, we know who Trump's nominee is. If you want that person to be the Supreme Court judge, then vote for your Republican senator, vote for Trump for president, and kind of try to use that to get out the vote? Or do they just throw it through now and live with the consequences during the election?
From what I can tell, it looks like they're going to try to go through their first option, the faster route. At least the idea is they're going to try to get a name and a face out there that people can rally behind. You may see some talk about how McConnell is going to wait, but I think the risks of waiting far outweigh him trying to do it now. And the thing is, right now, we have a 4-vote minority in the Senate. So we need 4 votes to stop this nomination. We need 4 Republicans.
2 have already basically said that they are not going to vote for a nominee. You have Susan Collins of Maine, who, please take this with a grain of salt, she has a history of changing her mind.
I would say, yeah, she has a history of Susan Collinsing it.
Her quote, "In fairness to the American people, who will either be re-electing the president or selecting a new one, the decision on a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court should be made by the president who was elected on November 3rd. That would lead you to believe that that's the decision she's going to stay with, but who knows with her.
And the big thing right now is that Susan Collins is in a super tight race for her Senate seat. And this is a way of showing people that she's not full in on the Trump train. But we know from the past that Susan Collins just kind of wets her finger and sticks in the air and see which way the wind blows.
Yeah, she's been known to basically say, oh, I'm mortified by this decision that I helped make possible.
Right. Well,
it's
that's
what a lot of good that does now.
That's exactly what she did with the Kavanaugh hearing.
We also have Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. who said recently, "I did not support taking up a nomination 8 months before the 2016 election to fill the vacancy created by the passing of Justice Scalia. We are now even closer to the 2020 election, less than 2 months out, and I believe the same standard must apply." Again, sounds good. We'll see what happens.
Right, take it with a grain of salt. I would like to say that Murkowski is probably a little bit more principled in Alaska than Susan Collins is in Maine. So at least there's a little bit of hope with that, at least, that she'll stay fervent to it.
I think they both hope that they are both able to vote against the nomination, and they're the only two, so that it doesn't matter.
Right. But I said we need 4 votes. So where are we getting the others from?
Well, we have a few possibilities. Someone who's obviously not a fan of Trump and is somehow become like a almost beloved figure of liberals, even though he's a monster.
Pierre D'Electo himself.
Mitt Romney of Utah, who has not, other than stating his love of and regret for the passing of Ruth Ginsburg, has not really said one way or the other if he's going to vote for a justice to replace her before the election. We also have Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who again was the judiciary chair in 2016 when Merrick Garland was nominated, and he refused to bring that up for a vote in the Judiciary Committee. And the only thing he's said so far is that he wouldn't bring up the nomination this time, but he's not the head of the Judiciary Committee anymore. That's now
Lindsey
droopy
Graham.
dog Lindsey Graham. But he doesn't really say anything if he would vote one way or the other. Just, well, if I was in that position that I'm not in anymore, well, I wouldn't do it. That's great.
And then finally, you have Cory Gardner in Colorado, who is facing a pretty steep election deficit for his seat.
Colorado being generally a fairly liberal state.
Right. So let's look at these 3 and see if we can get 4 out of them.
Hopefully. I personally don't think Grassley. I'm hoping that Mitt Romney will just give us a spite vote.
I can see Mitt Romney doing like a nice spite to Trump just because he's so safe. Grassley can, but I don't see it happening.
Being in Iowa, I think that would be the end of his political career.
And with Cory Gardner losing how he is, I mean, he's most likely going to lose his race. So he's going to double down more on Trump stuff because of this. So why would he try to placate to a more moderate base when he's going to lose anyway?
Yeah, certainly he's the bribe candidate, right?
Right. I think we have to eliminate Cory Gardner because there's just no way he's going to do anything for us. And then it's not on this list, but same thing with Martha McSally too, where she was also in a tight race, so people thought that she was going to be opposed to this. But since she's losing as well, she's been doubling down on Trump's stuff. So your best 2 options right now are Mitt Romney and Chuck Grassley, and those are not looking good to begin with.
Yeah, if we wanted Mitt Romney to decide who the Supreme Court justice should be, someone would have voted for him.
And also, we need to remember, we need 4 votes. If we get 3 votes, that goes to a tie, which our vice president casts the tie-breaking vote.
So I wonder which way he's going to vote.
Right. So what can we actually do? Not much, unfortunately. I mean, we can put pressure on these guys, but like I said, if they don't care, they don't care. The best thing I've heard, and I think this is the best play we have, the Democrats need to play hardball. Threaten to stack the courts.
Yeah, make 2 more Supreme Court justices. If they push this through and they lose the election, well, instead of 9-member court, it'd be an 11-member court.
Yep.
There's nothing in the Constitution that limits the amount of justices.
Well, I saw even going up to like 15.
Whatever it takes, man.
Right. So it's like the only thing I can see right now is Chuck Schumer going to Mitch McConnell and saying, if you lose this election and the Democrats are in power, and if we flip the Senate, we will stack and pack the courts and you won't have a power or any power for the next generation to come. I think that's what you need to do. And hopefully that will scare some of the more moderate Republicans, potentially like Grassley or Mitt Romney, to the point where they'll say, okay, fine, to make sure that you don't do that, we'll stop this nomination. Otherwise, I see no plays. You can talk about how Democrats may try to slow down the process the best they can, but
I have heard try to impeach Trump again to slow it down.
But even then, you can still do business around the impeachment hearings. So that's not going to stop anyone. You can still ram a court or Supreme Court justice pick through in the morning and then do your impeachment hearings in the in the afternoon. The only thing we can really do is just scare them enough to have them vote against this. That's all we really have.
And no matter what you do, look at your nominees in the upcoming election. Anyone who votes for Trump's nominee, make sure you're voting against them. They are, in their own words, subverting the will of the American people.
For us in Wisconsin, it's Ron Johnson, right? Where he is on record in 2016 saying the exact same crap as all the other Republican senators were saying. And of course, like everyone else right now, he said this is just surprisingly different because of special pleading. This isn't about ethics. This isn't about integrity. This is about maintaining power for the Republicans. That's all it is, and that's all they care about. Like we talked about in the why you should vote for Joe Biden and how you should get involved, they know how to win, and they know how to keep their power. That's why you have to get involved, and that's why this is such a big deal to not horse around with this type of stuff.
If you're interested in carrying on the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if you think the things that she fought for are important, a woman's right to choose, the right to have a fair vote, the right to have gender equality, the right to have equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their gender, their sexual orientation, the color of their skin. You need to participate in democracy. You need to make sure that you vote, to make sure that you contact your lawmakers, your senators, your representatives, both at the federal level and at the local level, and make them aware of who you are, what your views are, and that you vote. That's the only way they're going to care about you. I guess you could just be rich and buy them. And, if anybody wants to do that for the progressive movement, by all means, it seems to be the only way things get done. But do what you can do. Do something. Push the system. Try to make an impact. Don't just buy a t-shirt, watch a documentary, buy a workout book. Those things might make you feel good, but they're not actually doing anything. They're not helping those causes that you say are important to you.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively.
I'm probably going to cut all of that.
I liked it. Yeah, it looks like a bad setup for a really crappy Stephen King book.
Maybe. I would think more like CSI Miami. Yeah, they find the brain washed up on the beach, and David Caruso comes and makes some one-liner, puts on his sunglasses.
Just starts screaming.
Yeah! Dude.
I'm so upset. My phone's broken. I've been on like 3 12-hour shifts in a row. Not handling this well, you guys.
Hey, Joe.
Oh. Yeah.
Did you hear that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died?
No, we're not introducing it like that. Jesus Christ. Well, this was depressing. This was just an overall depressing episode. I can only imagine.
All right, I think we're done then.
What October will bring.